Hi, my name is Devin Ballesteros and I present to you Philippine Communism. So, why did I choose this topic? One reason was because it was a great opportunity to learn more about Philippine history, and the other reason was because I always had a fun time listening to stories of my grandparents' crazy interactions with the Communist Party in the 70s and 80s. We will be going over how the party started, how they helped the Allied powers during the Second World War, how the party we know today came to be, what their role was in President Marcos's downfall, the peace treaties that were in talks to end the Communist Party, and finally what they are up to now. Let's start with a brief history about the party. Communism in the Philippines officially began when Partido Comunista ng Pilipinas, or also known as PKP-30, was established in 1930. The founding fathers were members of the Partido Obrero de Filipinas, a labor-oriented party founded to challenge the ruling nationalist and democratic parties at that time. Crisanto Evangelisto is one of the founding fathers, which is pictured on the left. The main goal of the party was to overthrow the Philippine government in favor of a better social system and to remove any US influences in the Philippines. So what was their role in World War II? The Hukbong Bayan Laban sa Hapon, which literally translates to People's Army Against the Japanese, were closely associated with PKP-30 and were formed by farmers to fight off the Japanese invasion of the Philippines. A three-front resistance which consists of military, political, and economics were agreed upon on. The military's goal was to constantly attack the Japanese and keep them off track so that they couldn't concentrate on activities that would gain the people's support. The political goal was to demonize the Japanese Republic and establish the idea of a democratic nation, while the economic goal was to prevent enemies from looting. The Hawk movement was noteworthy for including women who pushed for their involvement in response to reports of the Japanese Army's war crimes against women. While several of these women fought, most of them stayed in villages, gathering supplies and intelligence while also training in other skills. Jose Sison, who was one of the leaders in the communist movement in the 1960s, proposed significant reforms within the PKP beginning of 1967. In what he called the First Great Rectification Movement, Sison allegedly called for the proper re-establishment of the communist movement in the Philippines. Sison was kicked out of the PKP after criticizing party leaders and established the Communist Party that we know today, and later set up its armed wing New People's Army the next year. Their name can be shortened to CPP and NPA. The first quarter storm were a leftist surge of student protests, rallies, and marches that occurred between January and March 1970, asking for constitutional changes helped the CPP and NPA gain more members and support. The CPP and NPA was torn in half by the 1978 Philippine election when the CPP and NPA's Manila Result Committee was rallying support for the anti-Marcos candidates, and the party's central leadership insisted on a complete boycott of the election and stressed the importance of armed struggle. This is what Jose Sison had to say about the party. So long as it resolutely, militantly, and thoroughly carries out its ideological, political, and organizational building, the Communist Party of the Philippines is certain to lead the broad masses of the Filipino people of various nationalities and ethno-linguistic communities to total victory in the national democratic revolution against U.S. imperialism and the local reactionaries, and bring about the start of the socialist revolution. Here are some of the major attacks that the CPP and NPA were involved with. On August 21st, 1971, the Manila Plaza Miranda bombing, where 9 were killed and 95 were wounded. On April 21st, 1989, the CPP and NPA assassinated Colonel James Rowe, who led a U.S. Army division providing military assistance to the Philippine government. On August 21st, 2010, 40 CPP and NPA members ambushed a police vehicle outside the city of Catarman using two improvised explosive devices and gunfire, where they killed 8. On August 6, 2011, approximately 30 CPP and NPA members kidnapped Henry Dono, the mayor of Linguig, Surigao del Sur, and two of his bodyguards, where they later released him in October after Dano publicly apologized for his alleged human rights violation. On January 27, 2013, members of the CPP and NPA opened fire on a truck carrying policemen and civilians in the town of La Castellana, where 9 were killed and 12 were wounded. On August 15, 2015, a CPP and NPA unit launched two attacks on the same day in the province of Agusan del Sur. The members destroyed a truck using improvised explosive device and later attacked two men, one civilian and one member of the armed forces of the Philippines. The civilian was killed while the AFP member was wounded. President Marcos's eventual downfall began when Jose Sison met with the CPP and NPA Central Committee in February 1971 to discuss his intention to attack a Liberal Party rally in Manila which was opposed to Marcos. The attack was intended to prompt yet another government crackdown and preferably win support for the CPP and NPA. Three CPP and NPA members threw grenades on stage at the rally in Manila's Plaza Miranda on August  21, then fled to a nearby CPP and NPA camp. Members of the Liberal Party blamed President Marcos for the attack, which killed a large number of his opponents. President Marcos retaliated by banning leftist political activities and suspending habeas corpus. Marcos's power grew as a result of these steps. However, hundreds of student recruits joined the CPP and the NPA in reaction to Marcos's repression. In the meantime, Sison denied that the CPP and the NPA was responsible for the attack. Because so many things were happening during this time, Marcos decided to pass martial law, which in the beginning most Filipinos supported because of the peace and order it achieved in the first year. But what really broke the camel's back in his eventual downfall came with the assassination of Benigno Aquino II. After the assassination, the Catholic Church, a group of former political party leaders, the business elite, and even military factions started to put pressure on the government. Even Marcos's longtime supporters and foreign government turned their backs on him in 1986. And we can see that when General Fidel Ramos, Marcos's second cousin and chief of staff, along with Defense Minister Juan Ponce Enrile, transferred their allegiance to Cory Aquino, Benigno's wife, at a critical moment. The military revolt led by these two men against Marcos dismantled the one thing that held Marcos in power, the military. Marcos was sworn in as president in Malacanang Palace for winning the 1986 snap elections. However, foreign ambassadors boycotted with the exception of a new Soviet ambassador. Eventually, Marcos boarded a plane to Hawaii while his opponent Cory Aquino was being sworn in as president, where he lived in exile, formally ending his 21-year presidential run. 40,000 casualties has been reported since the re-establishment of the Communist Party in 1968. Now let's look over the peace treaties that were in talks over the years. The Aquino administration and the CPP and NPA participated in brief talks beginning in December 1986. However, on January 1987, CPP and NPA members infiltrated a group of farmers protesting in favor of agricultural reforms outside Malacanang Palace in hopes of forcing a violent government response that would justify ending talks. 13 protesters were killed when government forces opened fire on them. Aquino declared total war on the CPP and NPA, and as a result of this declaration of war, the group launched attacks, especially in Manila, which further split the group and resulted in a drop in membership. In 1995, negotiations resulted in the Joint Agreement on Safety and Immunity Guarantee, which was signed by the NDF leaders under President Fidel Ramos's administration. The JSIG paved the way for future peace talks by ensuring that those participating in negotiations have free and safe travels without the fear of being searched, watched, or arrested. In 1998, the parties signed another agreement, the Comprehensive Agreement to Respect Human Rights and International Humanitarian Law, in an effort to protect civilians from when the government and the CPP and NPA confronted each other. However, shortly after this agreement, negotiations broke down and conflict resumed at a high level when Joseph Estrada was elected as president. Throughout the 2000s, the pattern of switching between negotiations and aggression continued. When Gloria Macapagal Arroyo took over from Estrada in 2001, she began talks with the CPP and NPA, but those talks came to a halt when the US designated the CPP and NPA as a terrorist organization at Arroyo's request. As Benigno Aquino III took over in 2010, the government attempted to resume talks. However, the talks has been hampered by the CPP and NPA breaking a truce, ongoing fighting, and suspected human rights abuses on both sides. And this takes us to the present. The government have claimed that the CPP and NPA is on the verge of collapse and expressed confidence that peace can be achieved by 2022. Due to President Duterte's past involvement with socialist organizations and with Jose Sison being his university professor, people thought that he was in a perfect position to secure a resolution to the communist insurgency. The government even created programs to help former CPP and NPA members rejoin the society. However, it is a known occurrence for members of the CPP to surrender in order to get government assistance and then swiftly go back to the party. The CPP and NPA have accused President Duterte of red tagging, the practice of labeling someone as an affiliate of the CPP and NPA, which has spiraled out of control since the beginning of his administration.